warrior, and pharaoh, Ramesses II.
Ramses II was one of the famous kings. In the ancient Egyptian history, he ruled more than 67 years and turned the land of Egypt to be an open museum for his achievements.
But analysis of the wall art and statues is revealing the dual role of a pharaoh of Egypt. The first function is as defender of the nation.
He's the warrior, champion, the single hero who defends Egypt from all enemies.
The second role involves religion.
The role of the pharaoh in the religious realm is not just as chief worshiper or intermediary between mankind and the gods, but the king has one foot in the divine world and one foot in the human world.
The pharaoh's authority and power was dependent on fulfilling these two roles. But Ramesses was so successful as the warrior king that he ran out of people to fight, and thus undermined his position as ruler. Reliefs within the temple illustrate this dilemma. The story begins with a battle, the Battle of Kadesh.
Ramses II had this big, important battle, was the Battle of Kadesh with the Hittites. We can see written in the temple.
During the first part of Ramesses' reign, Egypt was at war with its powerful neighbor, the Hittites. The Hittites ruled an empire that stretched from northern Turkey into Syria. Between them and the Egyptians lay the town of Kadesh. Reliefs on the walls of Abu Simbel contain the oldest complete record of a military engagement in history. Dr. Mohammed El-Bailey is investigating the brutality of the battle.
Here, the figure showing the Egyptian beating and punishing Hittites. They are beating them very hard.
It was a clash of superpowers.
What makes Kadesh so unique is that it really is a clash of empires. Ramses finds the whole Hittite army with all of the Hittites' allies are there facing on the battlefield. And in fact, I think this was something relatively rare in ancient history, that two huge armies clashed with each other on the battlefield.
Abu Simbel reliefs depict a violent battle using the most technologically advanced weapons available at the time.
They had the chariot for the first time, and they had the horse, and therefore they were able to build the empire.
An Egyptian chariot is very highly maneuverable. It can turn on a dime, and they can basically make what are essentially missile runs. It's essentially the F-16 of the ancient world.
Chariot warfare involved making 30-mile-an-hour runs at the enemy, firing as many arrows as possible, and then wheeling into a retreat.
Basically making strafing runs, going close, shooting his arrows, and then his chariot driver would veer his chariot around, would speed off until he could get back out of range, and then make another strafing run on them.
Ramesses held the Hittites at bay and successfully defended his country.
In the 21st year of his reign, he makes a peace deal with the Hittite Empire.
With no battles left to fight, Ramesses could not fulfill the warrior function of pharaoh.
What do you do when you run out of enemies? So now Ramses has a political problem.
Abu Simbel reveals Ramesses' solution.
And the way he solves this is by going in the opposite extreme and emphasizing his religious role. Now that he can't show that he's a warrior because there's nobody left to fight, he can say, I'm a living god.
Ramesses declared his divinity.
Now at this point, Ramses puts both feet in the divine world and he becomes a living god, 24/7, all year round. The Egyptians have a living god ruling over them.
Abu Simbel became not just a temple to the gods, but a temple to Ramesses himself as a god.
Ramses II built this temple for himself, as a god, to worship himself.
Here we are arrived to the sanctuary, the holy of the holy place, where Ramses II deified and placed between the other gods.
And you have his statue in the sanctuary with the other statues of the three major gods of Egypt, and he's one of them, equal to them.
This was a political masterstroke.
This was the perfect cover, that of living God, for a frail old man And we know nothing about his mental faculties. Could he even see anymore? Had he gone blind? We simply don't know.
The temple at Abu Simbel reveals the two most important parts of being pharaoh: defending Egypt and communing with the gods. It reveals how Ramesses solved the problem of being too successful at the first role, that of defender, by becoming a living god. The penultimate discovery of the top 10 continues the story of the great pharaohs in the years after they died. It is a turbulent tale involving organized crime, robbery, murder, and state-sanctioned terrorism, and reveals the mystery of the missing royal mummies. The 10 greatest discoveries of Egypt let us see the world of an empire that lasted 3,000 years. Much of what we know of ancient Egypt comes from opening the tombs of the pharaohs, but they also created a mystery. Time and time again, the tombs were discovered empty. The pharaohs' mummies were missing.
One of the most important discoveries in Egyptian archaeology was the discovery of the royal cache. Egyptologists came face to face with literally a who's who of all the great kings.
The discovery of the cache, or hiding place, of missing royal mummies reveals insights into the political state of Egypt at the height of her power. A story of organized crime and state-sanctioned terrorism that nearly destroyed a nation. The evidence lies on the west bank of the Nile. The Valley of the Kings contains 63 tombs for some of the greatest pharaohs of Egypt. Nearly every tomb has been discovered empty. The treasures and mummies gone. But about 3 miles away from the Valley of the Kings is another canyon. It contains no tombs, and it was thought, no secrets. Then in 1890, a shepherd was searching the cliffs for a lost goat. In a crevice halfway up one of the cliffs, he came across the entrance to a cave.
And when he entered inside the shaft, he saw a corridor, maybe more than 200 feet, cut in the rock.
Inside were the remains of over 50 different burials, including the mummies of some of the greatest pharaohs in history. To solve the riddle of why the mummies were there, archaeologists must look at the political and social state of Egypt 3,000 years ago. Drought and infighting between rival political factions was bringing the country into a state of anarchy.
All these problems, the ecological, political, foreign invasions, you basically have a case of systems collapse. When a complex governmental system is facing multiple threats, multiple problems that it can deal with one-on-one, but when they all happen at the same time, the system can't take it and the whole thing cascades and fails.
Society broke down. The population was facing famine and poverty. The need for gold drove the people to the one place they knew they would find it: the tombs of the pharaohs.
At night, people used to go inside to look for mummies and enter inside the tombs and rob everything.
These acts of sacrilege were born out of desperation.
Once that line between civilization and chaos is crossed, nothing, not even belief in the gods, fear of sacrilege and fear of eternal damnation, will prevent you from robbing tombs and violating temples.
But this was not the work of random criminals.
It definitely was organized crime. It was well-structured, organized groups of men with even sort of an internal ranking system amongst them. Tomb robbery as kind of a growth industry, really.
This created one of the first examples of organized crime in history.
Literally everybody gets into the tomb robbing business. Everybody is in on it, from the highest officials, if not involved actually in robbing the tombs, then turning a blind eye and getting a golden handshake.
But there were some priests at the Temple of Luxor who still saw themselves